Hello once again, it's Brian Burke here from Thrive Now. Today we're going to extend more on the idea of what it is to be a listener that is someone who waltzes, who dances, a listener who knows how to waltz. I know initially that sounds a little bit strange, but I'm intentionally doing that to give us a bit of a word picture to help understand what listening can represent, particularly before when I juxtapose that against wrestling, that there's a distinct difference between listening in a wrestling style compared to listening as a dancer. And today we're going to hone in on that image of waltzing and how that can personify what it means to listen well, to be a great listener. So in listening as someone who waltzes, waltzing includes a gracious flow and exchange of 1, 2, 3 steps where the two dancers move across the dance floor. There's a flow and there's a beauty as well. There's meaning, there's purpose. I'm saying that if we listen well, we listen as someone who waltzes, then it can actually add a sense of beauty and purpose and meaning to our listening and just to our whole being, to how we exist. So listening well and listening as someone who, like a waltz, is a great image of that flow and exchange and movement of information, of ideas, of presence between the people that are communicating. Okay, let's try and delve a little bit more into this. In particular, what more does it look like? How can I achieve waltzing, like listening as someone who waltzes? So I'm going to suggest to you that in that area of understanding, that as we listen, there are 3 steps that are taking place. There's an exchange of 3 movements. So if I could put it this way, an awareness. There's an exchange of an awareness. We step in and out of an awareness of 3 different areas. Firstly, we step into an awareness of ourselves. So just as there's a dancer, they're aware of themselves. They're aware of their own posture, of where their feet are, their stance and their movements. There's also then an awareness of the dance partner. That as someone is waltzing, they're aware not only of their stance, but they're aware of where is their partner at? How are they going? What's going on there? And then there's an awareness of the environment. As 2 people waltz, they're aware not only of themselves, but aware of where they're at on the dance floor, of the movement on the dance floor. They're aware of, indeed, where other people are at. If I could drill this down a little bit further, I would say that their awareness is aware of story. They're aware of their own story. They're aware of the story of the one they're dancing with, and they're aware of the story of their environment. And we're going to talk more about story on another point, but in particular, that's what I just want to raise today, that as we listen holistically, as we listen as ones who waltz, we step in and out of a 1, 2, 3 awareness of our own story as listeners. We step into an awareness of the story of the one who's speaking to us. We also step into an awareness of the story that we're both in, that we're in together as communicators. Right. That's a great picture of listening and waltzing. I want to go one step further now and add another element. The International Listening Association proposes that listening involves 3 components. There is a receiving, an understanding, and a responding. And this too can fit well within our analogy of dancing and listening is like a waltz. We can step in and out of the 1, 2, 3 steps of that receiving. I step into receiving what has been spoken to me. I then step into an understanding, a processing, and a dialoguing, even internally in myself, of understanding, seeking to understand what is the speaker saying to me. And then there is a response. There's an ability to respond. Now, I appreciate a lot of you might instinctively going, hey, hold on now, good listening doesn't necessarily mean that we need to speak. And yes, that's very true. But I still believe that we always respond when we listen. That response might not be externally, but we certainly respond. See, when someone speaks to us and we develop an understanding, a perception, a thought of what they've said to us, there is a response. That response might be internal, but there is certainly a response. And even when we look at listening from areas such as nonverbal communication, I can respond even with silence. I can respond with a nod or a gesture, but there's still a response. So there's a movement between a receiving, a seeking them to understand, and a responding. Now, if we put all this together, then listening as one's at waltz, listening like a waltz, gives us a great understanding and picture that there's a flow and a movement, a grace and need, a beauty of stepping in and through the steps of I aware of myself as a listener. I become aware of the story of the one who's speaking to me. And I become aware of the story of what we're both in as speakers and listeners. At the same time, I'm moving through those 1, 2, 3 steps of receiving the information that's been given. As I listen, I'm receiving. I step into seeking to understand, to know what's being told to me. And then I step into a response. I'm responding to what's being said. Now, the great thing about viewing and listening in that image is it can take some of the pressure off. It can take some of the wrestling off. Remember we were talking before about listening like a wrestler. There's really no second chance in wrestling. There's no comeback. You're down, you're pinned, you're grappled. That's it. Game over. But when we listen as people who waltz, it's not just 1, 2, 3 step or cycle. There is a movement across the dance floor. There's a growing and there's an understanding. There's a flow. There is a bigger picture that develops, and that's exactly what can happen. When we listen as people who are like waltzing, we can grow and develop personally, but in exchange with who we're speaking with, there can be something wonderful that transpires, that transforms us more than just an exchange of details or interaction. It's more than just a one-off, oh, you got it right or you didn't. There's something that can develop. There's a greater understanding that can grow. There's a greater story that we can partake of, which is amazing. So that's the part there that I wanted to talk about today, with listening as people who like waltzing. It's a fantastic image to have, and I really do encourage you to take time to pause and just to reflect, to consider what does that look like in your life, to be someone who listens like they waltz, to be aware of your own story, to be aware of the story of the one that's speaking to you, to be aware of the story that you're both in, and then to be able to be more intentional of receiving, of understanding and responding. I know it might sound simple. It might even sound like, well, what's so big about that? But it is profound, because so often in our listening life and our habits, we're not aware sometimes of our own story as listeners. We're not fully aware of the story of the speaker or the story we're both in. And sometimes we do very little intentionality of trying to understand what's been spoken to us. We might just jump to responding. Sometimes we do very little receiving. And that's why Even though it might sound simplistic, I've intentionally drilled it down and given you that image there's a coat hanger to keep your thoughts and ideas on so that you can quickly and easily reference that when you're in communication, and you can quickly get that picture again. And if you could say recenter, recalibrate and bring yourself back to that place of holistic listening and go, oh, hold on now. I've skipped a step, or I'm not aware of the story of who I'm dancing with. And that's why taking time to reflect on this, or pause on it and consider what does it look like in your life, can really bring transformation. Thank you once again for your time. Have a great day. I enjoy catching up next time. Bye-bye.